Uh,
So I wanted to return to chapter 18 since we didn't get too terribly far with it. So I'm kind of treating tonight as being essentially uh, our dealing with this chapter. And just to refresh everybody's memory, the title that was given to this chapter by Ben is Awakening and Action. And the verse uh, that this chapter is a commentary on reads like this. This is the realm of the 10 Buddhas and Samantabhadra, the great ones. And we had occasion to talk about Samantabhadra and the fact that among the myriad bodhisattvas that are referenced in the Flower Garland Sutra, it's generally seen by Buddhist scholars as being a sutra where the central bodhisattva figure is Samantabhadra, who is often referred to within Sōtō Zen, at least, as the Bodhisattva of Great Activity, which I think is kind of helpful for our practice. I know it was for mine in terms of having a bodhisattva archetype, to use a term that originated with Tig and Dan Layton, to have a bodhisattva archetype that was focused on the fact that the way of the bodhisattva is a way of activity. It's doing. So looking at that general theme in this chapter, I wanted to begin with the section where Ben talks about how we are creating the world we live in and the world to come. And this is an important understanding to have. In fact, in contemporary thought, this is referred to, and I'm referring here to Western thought. What's being addressed here, that we are creating the world we live in and the world to come. It's the term that's used for that is worlding. We are worlding. We are very literally creating the world that we inhabit. And this happens on multiple layers, which, given comments I've made earlier in our look at this text on complexity theory, shouldn't come as a surprise. There's the layer of that within Buddhism, it would be most commonly understood here that we create the world through what we call karma. And that's one important way in which that takes place. We also create the world from a Yogacara perspective in terms of how we filter our view of the world, our limited view. And in that sense, we are creating the world we live in and the world to come. So we can see it in terms of karma and in terms of our own mental creation. that what we see, and this is a core teaching of Yogacara, what we see is an emanation from our mind, our take on things. So in both of these respects, we could be said to be creating the world we live in and the world to come. Now, and it's not to suggest that there's some duality between these two ways of taking our creating, the karmic and the Yogacara one. They're ultimately interdependent, intertwined. They are ultimately just one, what do you call it, being, but they are one way of seeing it. So to further elaborate on this, Ben next says, we are the fruit of seeds, and we are planting seeds. So this notion of seeds, which of course the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh reference seeds quite a bit in terms of our practice, in terms of the effect of karma, and so on and so forth. And just to take a sneak peek when we get to Saturday morning, when hopefully we'll all be able to convene in person, we'll be looking at one particular text of Hongzhi, the Guidepost of Silent Illumination. But the title of the book on Hongzhi's teaching that was written 25 years ago by Tig and Dan Layton is Cultivating the Empty Field. So this notion of cultivating the empty field, think of being the fruit of seeds while we are in turn planting seeds. But we tend to think that the problem with this imagery is we start thinking of seeds as substantial things that in turn are creating substantial things, which kind of flies in the face of the teachings on emptiness. And it's important to remind ourselves that the teachings on emptiness are kind of the foundation of the Huayan philosophy. So we know that to talk about the fruit of seeds and the planting of seeds is not creating solid things. So we can think of it as cultivating an empty field where there are no seeds in the spirit of the Heart Sutra. There are no seeds, there's no planting, and so on. And yet, there is activity. Hence, back to Samantabhadra. We don't become frozen in a state of just utter passivity because of the truth of emptiness. So this creating the world and planting seeds, important topics when we're talking about our activity. What is the world we are creating? What are the seeds we are planting? And the importance of seeing their emptiness. We've come back to this time and time again, recognizing that any view we do have is a limited view. So we need to come at it with that understanding, because we want to assume that what the world that we are creating, that we are worlding, so to speak, that is the best world. That's the genuine world. But that's not necessarily so. In fact, the very term genuine, real, is coming from the realm of delusion. And yet, we cultivate, as we should. We create, we whirl. So I just want to plant these seeds to keep this in mind, that we don't lose sight of this fact, so that we can continue to practice with open mind and heart. And we don't see ourselves as planters of seeds that are the vital essential seeds for the welfare of all beings. We are simply making our best effort. We are caring. And we're doing it with openness, always with openness. And part of that openness is the recognition that and we can maybe learn from the world of biology in this respect, that if we simply plant seeds of one variety, they're not going to have a very long life. That if you have diversity and a wide range of different seeds that continue to branch out, that you're kind of creating an ecosystem that's far more sustainable. But we have this built-in notion, it seems, that our seeds are the right seeds. They should all look like this. Even though we look at nature and we see such diversity and so many different seeds serving many different purposes. Maybe, as so many indigenous people are able to, we can learn by looking at the natural world around us and see the prajna that plays itself out all around in terms of that openness to creativity, to uniqueness, to difference, the merging of difference and harmony. Within the difference, we can have some rich harmonies, but without difference, there's no harmony. There's monotone. Important to remember. So one of the great thinkers of coming out of the Huayan school, the school that was devoted to the study of the Flower Garland Sutra, was Zhiyan. And he wrote that cause means cultivation of appropriate techniques, investigating with the whole body and fulfilling all the stages of enlightenment. And this is what is represented by Samantabhadra. The result means the complete result of ultimate dispassion and extinction of own being, the realm of 10 Buddhas, where one is identified to all. So that whole passage, beginning with cause means cultivation of appropriate techniques, comes from Zhiyan, the Huayan commentator. So cause means cultivation of appropriate techniques, such as practicing the Eightfold Path, such as the practice of Zazen, such as chanting, and all of the various techniques that we use. These are causes within the world. These are planting seeds. But they're by their very nature open-ended seeds. They're not seeds in the usual way that we think of seeds, in terms of planting a particular type of seed so that you can know what the product of it is going to be. In Zen, and I think in Buddhism more generally speaking, this the importance of beginner's mind, of don't know mind, also is an important factor when we're looking at the planting of seeds. That we can plant seeds in spite of the fact that by our own understanding, we don't know what the outcome of those seeds will be. But we plant them wholeheartedly, with whole body, as Jian expresses it. That doesn't cause us to lessen our wholehearted practice. We still go at it very wholeheartedly, and to understand that you can do that while also having an open mind and an open heart. I think it would be kind of normal to anticipate that if we don't know the outcome, well, maybe I shouldn't be expending my full effort into planting those seeds, because I don't know what will happen. And the not knowing often has the tendency to cause us to pull back a bit. We want to know if we're going to really give it our all. And yet, we can look in other areas like athletics. Athletes don't know if they're going to win a championship at the end of the season or not, but yet they give it their all. That's part of being an athlete. You give it your all. So can't our life play out in a similar fashion? We don't know what our seeds are going to be. But like an idealized athlete, we put it all on the playing field day after day after day. That's the way to play this game called life. The coming together of not knowing and planting seeds wholeheartedly. So it's an interesting way of seeing our lives. And this is what is represented by Samantabhadra. This great activity is great activity without knowing. And from that not knowing, the end of this quote talks about the result, meaning the complete result of ultimate dispassion and extinction of own being. Now, is that a result that we can look at and really feel driven to work towards? To become completely dispassionate and to bring about the extinction of own being, my sense of being a separate self. That's what this path is. The path of the Bodhisattva, the path of the great activity path of Samantabhadra. Ultimate dispassion echoes some centuries after this teaching, Dogen's discussion that we should have few desires. I mean, we are human, so it's only natural we are going to have desires. But the key to having a rich life is not to pile up desire upon desire upon desire and go about trying to satisfy as many of those as we can. Our way is to be very content with just few desires, some basic things. Things like food, shelter, medicine, also known as healthcare. These things. So we can perhaps extrapolate, once we take that on for ourselves individually, extrapolate that out to society at large. Can we even conceive of that? Truly. Kind of a flattened society in terms of desires. Is it even conceivable? It's becoming more and more challenging because our desires, with the progress of so-called progress of civilization, our desires continue to compound, kind of like interest. They compound as they grow and proliferate. So what are some of the ways that we can be guided in planting these seeds, in creating these worlds of worlding? Ben talks about practical methods of creating beauty and ending violence, ignorance, and deprivation as being essential in the Mahayana path of collective liberation. Because this is the Mahayana path, the path of the Bodhisattva. In its simplest formulation, it's simply delaying one's own enlightenment until all other beings are enlightened. This is collective liberation. It's going back into the marketplace again and again and again, rather than saying, well, I have a beautiful practice. I have peace of mind and all the good qualities that one would expect of a Buddhist practitioner. Collective liberation is looking at how are you interacting in the world. Otherwise, it becomes self-centered. And we're a long way from the dropping off of self. A long way from the Mahayana path of collective liberation. So at this point, I generally try to walk gingerly around lists, but there's the list of the 10 Buddhas that I thought it might be helpful to go through as they are laid out by Ben in this chapter. And hopefully, as we go through it, you'll kind of begin to see why I thought it worthwhile to take a few minutes to go through this exercise. So the first of the 10 Buddhas is the Buddha of non-attachment. Pretty key from the first teaching of Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths. Non-attachment. The second and third Noble Truths. Second is the Buddha of vows. And John, in the Buddhist quotes that he texts out to us, draws often from Shahaku's book, Living by Vow. So we kind of get, thanks to John, a decent exposure to what's being talked about here with the Buddha of vows and their importance. That they kind of, it's kind of like GPS in our time, maybe. It's setting our direction by making our vows, whether they're precepts or just more general 4 Bodhisattva vows. Whatever shape they take, they're setting an intention, setting a direction as to our path and what it will look like. Even though it's not about attaining a particular result, and yet we can kind of give it a description in this fashion, what it will look like in terms of our relationships with other beings. Because our own existence is purely an existence founded and driven by relationship, interdependence. So vow is about relationship. How do we relate to the world around us? And vows can be very helpful to us in that regard and can set our GPS. Without setting a specific address. In fact, that's kind of the magic of this whole practice, is that we don't need to have a specific address. As Dogen teaches us, and this was from another quote that John, it was either the one he sent today or the one just before that, about Dogen's teaching about right here and now. This is where the path unfolds. So it's more about right here rather than where we're headed. So what we're really orienting ourselves towards is right here. How do we relate to this? And that in turn sets our GPS for the next step and the next step. Hence planting seeds for the future while we're planting them right here and now. But without trying to control anything. We know we can't control outcomes. We don't know what the outcome will be. But that's not what this practice is about anyway. It's about taking care of this right here. And to get from this to something at a future time in another place, there will be many other factors that come into play. And we will be present in those future times as well and continue to respond in a caring way, guided by vow. And that's our path, that's our practice. Continuous practice, as Dogen expressed it. Third is the Buddha of karmic rewards, because he has faith. There's certainly a couple of different levels upon which we can take this kind of a statement. One, I'll term a somewhat more literal view, would be seeing karmic rewards as kind of an indicator of where one's rebirth might settle you when you come back to the next rebirth. But this can also be seen in terms of just this element of faith without knowing. The karmic rewards that don't abide by some strict accounting system that's generally accepted. the generally accepted accounting principles, right? If I remember that. Karma doesn't follow such conventions. At least not the karmic understanding of Zen Buddhism. And yet we don't deny karma. So there are karmic rewards. But in order to receive guidance from those requires faith, because there are no such principles that we can rely on. It is about faith. So it's important to see that and acknowledge it, because if we don't, we end up creating realms of thought that seem to provide some level of assurance to us. We can create those. That's part of our worlding activity. So we can be very good at that. Even though time and time again, it'll be proven wrong from our own experience. We'll think a certain action will certainly lead to a good result. And then it doesn't seem to. And we're left scratching our head. And we'll make exception after exception after exception, rather than going back and questioning the whole approach we're taking. We have to have faith, and we have to be prepared to have that faith kind of challenged. That's part of faith too. Otherwise, it wouldn't truly be faith if there were no challenges. That's not the sort of faith I've experienced. It will have challenges. And the fourth one I like, even though it's not a very glorious one. Maybe that's why I like it, because I kind of shy away from the limelight. You know, I like this fourth one that says the Buddha of maintenance, because he obediently follows, to just maintain one's path. Nothing flashy there. Obediently following is just to follow the teachings, to follow one's teacher. Not in some sort of worshipful way, but just out of respect, faith. And again, faith can be challenged. Maybe you'll find that faith isn't fully justified, because we're all human beings. And yet, the fourth Buddha, the fourth of the 10 Buddhas, obediently follows. It's kind of like this playing out of the faith that the third Buddha is pointing to. The fifth Buddha is of transformation, as he, she, everlastingly ferries beings to the other shore. I think we're all familiar with the metaphor, the Bodhisattva's metaphor that I was referring to earlier, about putting off one's own enlightenment until all other beings have been carried to the other shore to their own enlightenment. So this is what's being pointed to by ferrying beings to the other shore. And the other shore, this is transformation, because that's really what the other shore is pointing to. You know, as we know, as savvy Zen practitioners who've studied the Dharma for a while, you know, there is no other shore. It's right here. But it takes a transformation to see that. It's the transformation that's crossing you over to the other shore. It's not some physical trip you're making. It's the transformation that's the ferry that takes you to the other shore. And that's an experience I think we can all relate to. Seeing things just in a completely new way. So it's definitely the express ferry. It's sudden, very sudden. You don't have to book a ticket in advance. In fact, you can't. And you have no time to kick back. You're on the other shore before you know it. So the sixth Buddha is the Buddha of the Dharma realm because he pervades everything. So this harkens to the principal Buddha of the Flower Garland Sutra, who's not Shakyamuni, it's Vairochana Buddha, who is also referred to in Dharma teachings as Dharmakaya, the Dharma body of the Buddha. So, and it's this Dharma body that pervades everything. So this connects very clearly to the core Mahayana teaching that all beings are Buddha. This is pointing to the sixth Buddha, pervading everything. That's Buddha nature. That's Dharmakaya, the Buddha body. It permeates everywhere. There's nowhere it does not reach. So with that understanding, it's an easy move forward to the seventh Buddha as the Buddha of the mind, as he peacefully abides. Peacefully abides. For me, that echoes the wonderful line from the Metta Sutta, easily contented and joyous. And that also harkens to Dogen's teaching of having few desires. Having few desires, easily contented. Or in Christian terms, give us this day our daily bread. Very basic. That just seems to, it's almost pointing to like the alms rounds of Buddhist monks. Or kind of give us this day our daily bread. And this is all we seek in the world. Everything else is just our practice, our path. So they can be wonderful role models to us, even those of us with a lay existence, a lay practice, to not get caught up in the things of the world. To be able to live in the world, but not be of the world. Because the Dharmakaya is pervading everything, including our being. Most importantly, our being. Because that's where the seeds come to fruition and then can sprout and get planted elsewhere. Is thanks to the Dharmakaya of the sixth Buddha. The Dharma realm that pervades everything. So that, as I'm suggesting, brings us to the Buddha of the mind as he peacefully abides. And then the last three kind of continue in this in a similar vein. The eighth Buddha is the Buddha of Samadhi because he has no limits and no attachments. So the Buddha of Samadhi, Samadhi is concentration. And in the Theravadan teaching, samadhi was with reference to practice with the jhanas, the absorptions. And it was a very systematic, formalized practice. There were specific jhanas, which get referenced. In fact, in this the realm of the eighth Buddha, who has no limits, is pointing to boundlessness. And the fifth and the sixth jhanas are infinite space and infinite mind. So the Buddha of Samadhi, who has no limits, for people familiar with jhana practice, this seems to be pointing to the fifth and the sixth jhanas, where one becomes absorbed in first infinite space. And then the next step after that is infinite mind or consciousness. This is samadhi practice. And it's samadhi practice that takes us to the realm of no limits, also known as boundlessness, no boundaries. And where there are no boundaries, there are no distinctions. Distinctions are all created based on boundaries. What's inside the borders and what's outside the borders. Self and other. A basic dualism from which myriad dualities, pluralities get created. So, but this, the Buddha of Samadhi, who has no limits, is just the first part of the eighth Buddha. The other part, as it's laid out by Ben, is the Buddha of no attachments. And that's pointing to the last two of the jhanas, the seventh and the eighth, in my view. There's no thingness, as in nothingness, as in emptiness. And there's neither perception nor non-perception. So no thingness and neither perception nor non-perception is removing us from the realm of attachments. What is there to attach to? There are no things. There's nothing we can ascribe the quality of thingness to, that it is such and such. And such is a good way of putting it, because that leads me to talk briefly about suchness, which is, of course, just things coming together and creating this moment, this ephemeral moment, from which the realization of no thingness can blossom when we inhabit that moment of suchness with nothing to attach to. Ninth is the Buddha of the nature, because he is determined. And the Buddha of the nature is Buddha nature. It's just an awkward way of putting it. The Buddha of the nature, but Buddha nature. Our essential being, which has no essence. So it's kind of misleading in a sense to even call it essential. And then the 10th is the Buddha of wish fulfillment. And maybe the wish fulfillment, I immediately start thinking of Amazon and fulfillment centers, right? That's what wish fulfillment has come to mean in our day. Oh, I'm going to place an order with Amazon to get some wish fulfillment here. But this 10th Buddha, from the standpoint of practice, wish fulfillment is seeing the emptiness of wishes, the impermanence of fulfillment. So it's really seeing the dharma richness at play here in a term like wish fulfillment. At least that was my takeaway from this. Because, and that leads to a further reflection about there being wise and foolish wishes. Wise wishes are grounded in prajna, in understanding the nature of reality. So what would be an example of a wish like that, grounded in the present? Of being present with an open mind, with an open heart, with a caring mind, a compassionate mind, a mind of and heart of loving kindness. These would be wishes, so to speak, of how to live my life. And it's a way that's very much rooted in the present. And it doesn't call for fulfillment in the sense of a delivery on such and such a date, and I take possession of it so I can become attached to it. The fulfillment is nothing more than the practice itself. There's nothing external to that practice. It's all contained within it, the practice. If we're looking for it in some other place, this is the hallmark of delusion. And Samantabhadra, being great activity, I mean, he's the beautiful exemplar of this. It's simply the activity, also known as practice. It's the practice. It's the doing. That's the fulfillment. The way of the Bodhisattva, to borrow Shantideva's term, is this activity following this path that is self-fulfilling in the absence of a self. The way itself is fulfilling, which is why it's not dependent upon a particular outcome, something we could attach to and say, oh, this was successful. It's not to say it isn't nice. If it was successful, if other beings were materially improved by it in some fashion or another, there would be a sense of happiness, of satisfaction with that. But even at that was yesterday, or whatever the time frame was. Our practice is continuous. So it has to be a practice that is driven by vow, not dependent on outcomes. Because otherwise, we will become disheartened and lose faith. Harkening back to this list of 10 and falling back on some of the terminology that we've encountered in going through the list. So we can begin to see how this all intertwines. All these terms, and how these core basic Dharma teachings weave through them. So that through the practice, through practicing letting go of self, through our practice of Zazen, through our study of the Dharma, we can begin to really take on an active, as Samantabhadra is our role model, active Buddhist practice. And see the Dharma gates all around us. Not only in great outcomes, but that hit the bullseye, that one. At the bullseye in that wonderful example of Kobun, the bullseye is wherever our arrow lands. That's the miraculous quality of Dharma, of practice. To see the bullseye everywhere, in everything. It's no different than seeing the divine, the sacred, everywhere. The bullseye. Or as Ben expresses it, another lovely way to look at this, he says, how did you and I end up in the wondrous realm where such compassionate, wise beings have awakened from suffering and are acting for our welfare? Looking out at the realm of bodhisattvas, both the archetypes and the exemplars of those archetypes, as Taigen outlined in one of his books titled Faces of Compassion. He took the main bodhisattvas, including Samantabhadra, and then drew examples, contemporary examples of individuals who, in Taigen's mind, kind of exemplified the type of practice that those bodhisattvas represented. So how did we end up in this wondrous realm where such compassionate, wise beings have awakened from suffering and are acting for our welfare? That's a beautiful way of viewing things and a beautiful question to ponder. It's also kind of pointing to another rich practice, the practice of appreciation of this moment and all those within this realm who are part of this moment, including these wondrous beings in this wondrous realm. Ben goes on then to say the most wonderful things we can possibly imagine are already here, and we can learn to see them. That's another thing that practice opens up for us, is to see the truth of that statement. So I think I'm going to stop here. This time I feel a lot better about where we got in chapter 18. So we'll allow enough time for others to offer their thoughts, questions. So I'll bow out. Joe?
Just a comment. It seems like this is a perfect setup for Saturday's talk about Sandokai, the merging of difference and unity, that whatever you're doing, you're practicing, and whatever you're practicing, you're doing, you're taking action, and there's no separation there.
Yeah, except we're going to be looking at the guideposts of silent illumination, but that's also from
Ah,
the same package of teachings. It's just another further explication of that kind of foundational text of Sandokai.
yeah, I don't know why I had it stuck in my head that you were going to be talking about Sandokai. Maybe it's wishful thinking.
Yeah, we might be able to arrange wish fulfillment there at some point.
It's don't go mind.
Your order has been received, being processed. Okay, well, let's go ahead and chant out then the Eco-Sattva vows. I vow to myself and to each of you to commit myself daily to the healing of our world and the welfare of all beings, to live on earth more lightly and less violently in the food, products, and energy I consume, to draw strength and guidance from the living earth, the ancestors, the future generations, and my brothers and sisters of all species, to support others in our work for the world, and to ask for help when I need it, to pursue a daily practice that clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and supports me in observing these vows. All right, well, hopefully this will be our last foul weather of the winter, and we'll be able to get back to practice as we know and love it at the Zendo. So that's our plan for Saturday, at least. So good to see you all. Hope to see you on Saturday.
Okay.